Hello, welcome, how are you? I'm Dr. Melissa Mann, and this is Musings with Melissa. I've actually stuck to doing this at least on Wednesdays for the last little bit here, and my times are still varying. I'll get down to a specific time, but today I figured, geez, I have the time before I get into my energy pulse at 9:30, so I thought I would jump in here and do some musings now. And it's interesting because I looked this morning at like, okay, what am I actually going to talk about today? What's kind of floating in the world? Hey, Parisa, nice to see you. And this topic of coping has come up a lot lately, and it was interesting because I had a couple different sessions yesterday that kind of were on this topic. And as a psychologist, one of the things that I was taught to teach people is coping skills. And anybody who's ever been in any kind of mental health program or, like a partial hospitalization or an inpatient hospitalization or as any, mental health training, there's this word coping skills that gets like thrown around quite a bit. Like, use your coping skills. What are your coping skills? Make a list of your 15 coping skills and all of those things. And this isn't, I wanted to talk about this not from a space of dissing coping skills, but because I think that there is absolutely a value in those things. And some, like, if you've never heard that before and you're like, what is she talking about? Coping skills are like, go for a walk, call a friend, find something funny to watch on TV. Like, they're all things that you can do in the moment when you're struggling. And there's a value in that. So this isn't to take away from that, but where the danger in coping skills that I've watched for people is where people start to make that the answer. And first of all, anywhere you've made anything the answer, would you be willing to destroy and create all of that? So right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds. And if you're joining me for the first time, you've never heard that before, that is the Access Consciousness Clearing Statement. And if you'd like more information on that, you can go to theclearingstatement.com, and Dr. Dane here explains that beautifully. But anytime we just bring up energy of something, then we use the clearing statement to knock that out. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about today as we're talking about coping skills, because coping skills are sort of these things that you do right now when you're struggling, when you're having anxiety or panic or sadness or anything like that. But something that always frustrated me is that it always felt like, okay, so that's how I cope with this emotion or this thing in the moment, but it doesn't actually change it, and it doesn't actually change the energy of your life or what's going on for you. And so it's kind of like how do you cope in the moment? And this got brought up yesterday because I had a therapy patient say to me, I feel like I've spent the last 10 years coping instead of like living my life. And I was like, man, like, isn't that the thing that so many people end up doing? Is they're living their life, they're happy, something happens, and then they go into sort of some kind of tailspin of depression, anxiety, or something else of, where they're not feeling like themselves anymore. And then everything they're taught from every angle is how to cope. Use this to cope with your anxiety, use this to cope with your depression. But none of those things are solutions, and nothing actually changes. And so it's great because it gets you through the moment, and it doesn't actually create like the change that people are looking for, asking for. I talked about this a long time ago, and it hasn't come up in a long time, I guess, or it's something I haven't really looked at again. But, there is what's the word I want? A held view, like that like anxiety, like generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, that those things are relatively uncurable, that those are something that somebody has, it's a diagnosis they're given, and then it's like this life sentence that people can't overcome. And it used to just make me crazy, because some doctor would have told somebody when they were 13, like, you have generalized anxiety disorder, so now you have to figure out how to cope with your anxiety throughout your life, rather than understanding that there's actually another possibility available. And just because you've had some level of, emotional distress at some point in your life doesn't mean that that has to define you, and that then you don't go from that point figuring out just how to cope, but that something else is actually possible. And I didn't get this until I started using the tools of access consciousness. And I think that there are a lot of people in the world who have no idea that that's even an option, that they've instead been given some diagnosis and decided that that is like their path, and not realizing that the tools of access actually do things to change it. And I'm not saying access is the answer either. It's just the set of tools that I use and I found to be extremely helpful in these things. There's probably other modalities and other things that also actually change things. But what's been interesting for me is watching how like using the tools of access actually can change the energy of what's underneath. And so something that's occurred in the last, I don't know, since I went out into private practice, I guess, which was just about a year ago, is that not only am I having an influx of clients coming to me because they're looking for something different, but I'm also having therapists as clients come to me because they're looking for something different, which is really cool because that was me. That was me as a psychologist feeling extremely anxious, panicked all the time. And here I was in the world teaching people how to get over their anxiety and depression. And I remember distinctly like not wanting people with anxiety to come to me because I felt like a fraud, because I was like, I can't even solve my own anxiety. How am I supposed to help somebody else with their anxiety? But I had all of the coping skills, and like that's what I was teaching people. But nobody was actually getting beyond that anxiety until either we medicated them, right? Or some major life circumstance changed, you know? So it was like they were able to get out of whatever circumstance that was. And that was the thing that was able to flip it at times. But beyond that, most people were as stuck as I was. And then I didn't feel like I had the tools to help them. And so one of the greatest gifts of Access Consciousness has been learning the tools to actually change the energy underneath what's causing all of that. And there's a lot of different tools. So, I mean, I could go into all of them, but some of them that have created some of the biggest change is this clearing statement I just brought up a minute ago, is the right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. And you don't have to understand it cognitively. If you take a bars class or a foundation class, we get into like the 6 pages of it and really go through it and explain what it is and like what each energy is and all of that. But the idea of it is that when you use that, the pod and poc is like the short version of it. And pod and poc is the point of creation and the point of destruction. And so we're going back, we use that to like wherever you like locked this point of view in, you go back to the point of creation where you created that, whether that was in this lifetime when you were real little, when you were a baby, when you were in your mom's womb, or in other lifetimes beyond that. And so anywhere that got created, it starts to unravel that. And so then you have different choices available. And so it changes the energy of a situation. Also, access bars is like something that moves and changes the energy. And we have other energy. We do body processes and symphony of possibility sessions and different things like that that are all either hands-on or hands-off energy processes that actually move and change the energy under what's created, whatever the upset is in your world, that actually creates change. And one of the other greatest tools that I early on really got, that was creating a lot of the anxiety for me, was this "who does this belong to" tool. Because nobody ever told me that I was psychic, that I was like soaking up the energies of the universe, because I think of like a psychic medium where like you know, are conversing with somebody's lost loved one, which I couldn't do. So I didn't understand that like I was still picking up on energies of people all the time. And for whatever reason, from the time I was young, people always came to me and talked to me about whatever was going on in their world, their problems, everything else. And I would get so entrenched in like other people's realities. And I had no idea that like I was actually like aware of their entire universe all the time. And so as soon as I learned this tool of "who does this belong to," I was able to be like, oh, this isn't even mine. Cool. Return that to sender with consciousness. And I also was aware with that same tool of a capacity I have with the earth. And so if you've never heard this before and this sounds a little crazy to you, the tool is you ask, who does this belong to? Is it mine? Is it someone else's or something else's? And if you get that it's someone else's, like wherever that lightens is kind of like what, where you go from there. And if you get that it's someone else's, you can say return to center with consciousness attached, right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. You can go on more and say, and everywhere I bought this is mine, right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. And if you get that it's something else's, it's almost always the earth. And one of the easiest ways to contribute energy to the earth is you just do a 1, 2, 3. And so you just pull up all the energy of what's like coming up in your world and just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that just sends that energy back to the earth and it contributes to the earth and it also releases that from you as well. These aren't things I was taught in school. These aren't things that I was taught in the training to be a psychologist. That is so much more about the energy underneath. That is what's actually keeping us stuck so much of the time. And that while using a coping skill, such as taking a walk, well, a lot of times the walk thing helps me more because I connect to the earth. But like, take deep breaths, call a friend, watch something on TV, color a picture, like these things. It's not to say that they don't work, but likely they're things that then you use again and again and again. And because it isn't as though like the energy changes. And what if you could do any of those things, but from a space of choice, because it's fun for you, because it creates something from your life, because it relaxes you, rather than a like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so upset, so stressed, I need to find a coping skill. What if you actually had the toolbox of the tools of access consciousness where you can be like, all right, cool, like, what is this? And really get the energy of what that is. Another thing that we talk about, which I won't get deeply into in this conversation, is entities and being aware of entities. And so it may be that, you're aware of, when we say entities, actually everything is an entity. Everything has energy. So even things that you've thought of as inanimate objects. But when I talk about like, it might be an entity you're aware of, it may be something around you that has an energy that is, maybe it's somebody, that passed away and you're aware of them, even if you don't see or hear them, which is something I never used to get. And we actually have lots of tools in access consciousness for communicating with entities and releasing them. A lot of times they just don't know that they don't have a body anymore and that they can go. And so we have different tools and you learn those tools in the foundation, and you can also like take a class on Talk to the Entities that really gives you, it's a 2 full-day class that gives you the energy of, or like all the tools that you need to kind of deal. I don't even want to say like to handle them, to play with them, to receive from them and release them in a way that works. So I'm actually hosting Brandy Nelson here for Talk to the Entities class at Halloween weekend. So that'll be really fun. So it's that Friday and Saturday of Halloween. So it's the 29th and the 30th. And then I have a foundation class the following weekend here in the Chicago suburbs. So when Brandy's here, we'll be downtown Chicago. And then my foundation class is closer to me out in the suburbs. And in those classes, you learn these tools that you're like, oh my God, like, why wasn't I taught this? Like, from the time I was a little kid, like, if only like we had these tools from the time we were younger to know that there's something else available and that we can actually change the energy underneath anything, and that we have total choice in our lives and how we go through our life and what our how we handle things, and that like you don't have to be at the effect of the energies around you, whether it's entities, whether it's just picking up on other people's energies, whether it's just being aware of like all of the things and points of view that are going on in the world. That if you have these tools and are willing to play in them and use them, that you can move and change things in a way that is so different than anything, at least I was ever taught. And I know that may be not true for everybody. There's people who are sort of raised with the understanding of energies and like how that creates different things. And You know, if you listen to Shannon O'Hara's podcast and or books on Talk to the Entities and Beings of Light, she talks about like growing up with Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, and how he would like play games with them to like work on their psychic abilities, and you know, was able to talk about seeing auras and things like that. And I'm always like, oh, what a cool upbringing, because I certainly did not have that, and I don't think most of us did. And if you did, then that's amazing. And so, you know, when you start to look at this, like, what else is available for your life that you haven't yet chosen, that you maybe don't even know is available yet? And everything that is, we destroy and uncreate it. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. And that's one other tool. And then I'm going to finish this up because I got to do energy pulls in a minute. We ask a question in Access Consciousness. And so one of the things that, like, when we go into like this upset and intrigue and trauma and drama and like heaviness, or like whatever is coming up in your world, ask a question. And the question might be, hey, like, how does it get any better than this? Or what else is possible? And those are some of like the basic tools that we talk about in Access Consciousness. And it's interesting because I was looking at talking about beyond coping skills, and I realized that, you know, what is beyond coping skills? And some of those things are some of the, what we would consider like the basic tools of Access Consciousness. They're some of the very first things you learn. And they're the tools that I still use all the time, every day, and 100 other things. But it's like they create something so different. And I realized in talking about this, because, you know, I don't ever have a plan of where this is going to go, but like, these are some of the most basic tools that I'm talking about today, and yet they're the tools that create something different in your life. And so play with them and use them. And if you haven't taken a bars class, please get yourself to a bars class so that you can like have somebody like sit and like go through all this stuff with you and explain it to you. And truly, if you haven't taken the foundation, I would say the same. Like, the foundation is like the manual that you should have been given when you were born, in my opinion. Like, it just goes through so many different things: relationships, bodies, money, finance, business, like just anything that you've ever had a question about, ever. Like, you kind of get into that in the foundation, and like you start to just clear and unravel all these things in your life. So I don't think I finished that thought on asking a question, but when you ask a question, you don't have to look for an answer. So we've been taught our whole lives to ask a question to find the answer. But when we're moving energies around, when we're playing in the molecules, if you ask a question, then you just allow the universe to create that thing for you. And it may be just an awareness that comes up. So you can ask what else is possible, and you may not get anything, but by asking that question, you're already changing the energies, and you might get an awareness of like, oh, I could do this now, or oh, I could call this person, or oh, this would create something, or oh, I don't actually have to do anything here. I can just let this be. But when you ask a question, you're coming out of conclusion, and you're allowing something so much greater to show up. And it's often more than your mind can conceive of, or like if you were trying to figure it all out, and if your mind could figure it all out, you would have done so already. And so when you're asking a question of the universe, you're actually going beyond your thinking mind and allowing the universe to give you awareness. And knowing is so much different. Hey, Megan. And knowing is so much different and greater and faster than trying to figure things out. So be willing to know what you know. I realized that, one, I have an energy pull, so that's great, because I think I would just sit here and talk all day and deliver you like half a foundation class. So I won't choose that right now in this moment. But I'm so grateful for all of you and for following me, and whether you're seeing this on YouTube or on Facebook in the moment or in the future, I'm grateful for you being here and willing to look at and choose something beyond what this reality teaches. And I'm so thrilled to be able to share these tools with the world. And I'm so, so grateful that you're here. So I'll leave you with that, but I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you all soon. Bye.